So, how does your Monday morning going? We had a very interesting first speech, and the second one is going to be hopefully as interesting. We're just going to make sure that your Monday is going to be super enthusiastic and full of energy. So we're just putting a lot of things, including a secret bar of chocolate that you will know what I'm talking about when our speakers are going to be on board. Beyond that, I'm also super excited to introduce you to the moderator of this panel, because Jenny Kleeman is a super interesting journalist. I had a pleasure of following her in some different documentary that she made, but now she has also a new feature that is going to be even for me more interesting, that reading her book, that is Sex, Robots and Vegan Meat. That is something that also somehow is in line with what she's going to discuss, and that is the ethical mission of our startup. And then we can try to understand exactly how she wants to achieve that. I'm super excited. Hopefully, if you guys are also the same way excited, just make sure that you go on social media, try to use the hashtag CogX 2021, but also give a shout to our sponsors, Accenture, BT, Quantum Black, and Visa, and make sure that you spread the word. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Jenny, and the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Ahmed, and welcome to the stage. We have a panel of sustainability-focused entrepreneurs here for you today to look into how startups and consumers can make better informed choices, balancing ethics and sustainability. We've got Isabel Aagaard, who is the co-founder and co-designer at LastObject. In 2016, Isabel graduated from the Royal Danish Academy of Fine Arts in Architecture, Design and Conservation, and she's interested in waste reduction and methods to reuse and recycle. It's been an ongoing journey for her, she says. And also joining us is Ben Greensmith, who may have the coolest job title in the world. Let me get this straight here. He is officially Lord Chocolonely III, UK and Ireland country manager of Tony's Chocolonely. And if you don't know what Tony's Chocolonely is, you should find out. Its mission is to make chocolate free of child labor and slavery. Not just their chocolate, but all chocolate worldwide. And they describe themselves as an impact company that makes chocolate. Ben started his career in food and drink over 20 years ago. He's worked at Innocent Drinks, he's worked at Propercorn, and he's been working at Tony's since September 2018 as employee number 1, and is responsible for the UK and Ireland. So welcome to you both. And perhaps we should begin with just getting you both to outline what your company does. Tony, tell us about Tony's Chocolonely.
Hi, yeah. So I'm Ben, and I work for Tony's Chocolonely, and we do have a very serious mission. So while I have the best job title in the world, as Jenny says, we want to make chocolate free of slavery and child labor, and not just our chocolate, but all chocolate worldwide. So what's he talking about, right? Because this is chocolate and this is 2021, but I don't know how much you know about chocolate, and where it comes from, but cocoa grows on trees around the equator, and 2/3 of the world's chocolate actually comes from 2 countries, Ghana and the Ivory Coast in West Africa. And there are a handful of chocolate companies, so the big chocolate companies, Mars, Nestle, Mondelez, Hershey, Ferrero, and then the chocolate producers, Barry Callebaut and Cargill, and they control about 95% of all of the cocoa that is bought and sold. So in our eyes, this is where the problems basically start. These companies pay as little as possible so they can make as much money as possible, and that leads to big structural problems. And the problem in West Africa is poverty, and because the farmers, you've got about 2.5 million farmers out there, mostly mums, dads, grandparents, small holder farms, a couple of football pitches big, but because they're paid so little, they live in poverty. They have to use kids on their farms, and so today there are 1.6 million kids, of whom 90% are working illegally on these cocoa farms. And then in the worst instance, you've got a minimum of about 30,000 who are sold and trafficked and held as modern day slaves. And this has been going on for decades. And Tony's, we exist to raise awareness of the issue, which I'm doing with you guys now, and ultimately show that there's a different way to make delicious tasting chocolate that doesn't involve exploitation. And that's what we've been doing now for 15 years. and we are the #1 chocolate company in Holland. We launched in the UK about 2 years ago, and we want to grow so much and drive so much awareness and help as many farmers as possible so that we can together change the chocolate industry for the better.
Excellent stuff. So Isabel, tell us about LastObject.
Yes. Amazing story, Ben. Wow, that's a really good way of like kind of framing the whole thing. We're very much into the same. We want to create awareness and also drive our business in a positive and sustainable way. We have founded LastObject on the mission to eliminate the need for single-use items. So Q-tips, tissues. We like the biggest design problem we want to solve is the toilet paper. Like we're really aiming for the high, but let's start with some of the other products first. So we started the whole company creating this reusable Q-tip, and this is simply just a Q-tip that looks like a Q-tip. It feels like a Q-tip, but when you use it, you wash it, and then you just use it again and again and again. And this is the base for all our products. So our products are, for example, the tissue. So it's a tissue box. It has the functional and the look like a normal tissue, but it has reusable tissues that you can use and reuse and wash and reuse. So we simply eliminate this habit that we have of using all of these different products and discarding them and using them and discarding them. Because in the long run, this little habit actually amounts to a lot of waste. So that's our mission, and we just keep making new products, rounds, anything that you use and discard.
Both of you have a very, very strong design aesthetic in your products. How important is that, of making things that are kind of visually striking? Because it seems to me that you are almost smuggling your ethical mission in alongside a really attractive product that people care about. So Ben, maybe if I could go to you first about your packaging and all of the rest of it. How much thought has gone into all of that?
Well, I mean, it is the total opposite. When you look at a bar of Tony's, it doesn't, you don't, the first thing you see is just fun, vibrant packaging. So it is really important. But it's a really interesting story to how Tony started, because I call it the story of the accidental chocolate bar. 15 years ago, 3 Dutch journalists in Holland, in the Netherlands, were making a food program on TV, and they uncovered, it's called Keuringsdienst van Waarde, which means food unwrapped or food uncovered, and they look at brand claims, marketing claims, food supply chains, and one of these journalists was a chap called Teun van der Kerken, which basically means Tony of the kitchen. And he basically turned to, I think, page 8 on in a newspaper, and he found that there was this problem of about 2 million kids working illegally on cocoa farms in West Africa and high instances of slavery. And he was like, this is nuts, right? So he basically, they, as part of this TV program, they decided to take a stand. And Tony, basically, really long story short, ended up eating a load of chocolate from the big chocolate companies for this TV program. He filmed himself eating it. He was pretty sure that there was some form of slavery and child labor in the value chain, and then he hired a lawyer to prosecute himself for crimes against cocoa. And he basically went out to West Africa. He found 4 boys who had been sold and trafficked as slaves, and he got them to testify against him, and flew one of them back to Amsterdam and prosecuted himself for crimes against humanity by basically knowingly financing slavery and child labor by eating cocoa. And off the back of it, he didn't go to jail. It went on for 2 years. The judge said to him, "Look, morally, you've got a point, but I can't draw a link between the cocoa that these boys have eaten and the cocoa that you've produced and the cocoa that you've eaten. You've got a point." So Tony basically got a designer to make everything in the Netherlands at the time, 15 years ago, was blue. he got a designer to make this bar, this very same bar, in bright red packaging, and it was a conversation they had. The designer did it as a bit of a mate. 15 minutes it took him, and that is the packaging that we've used ever since. And then we changed the packaging depending on the recipe, but all of them are bright, impactful. But in honesty, it's so important for us now. But when we set out, we never set out to create a multinational business. It was at that stage that Tony decided, look, if I'm really going to change things, the best way of doing it is from within and showing there's a different business model. So this started as a PR stunt, but has now morphed into the biggest chocolate brand in Holland. So it's really important for us, but it was accidental. It was perfectly accidental.
And why Chocolonely? You have to explain that.
Tony, yeah. So Tony, because turn, the international translation is Tony, and then lonely. The lonely part comes from the lonely battle to rid the cocoa industry of the inequality that still blights it to this day. So that's where the mouthful name that you would never give a brand if you were creating it, that's where it comes from.
And Isabel, there's a lot more intention behind the design of your products, isn't there?
Yes. I think that what we look at when we're creating these products are really to make sure that sustainability doesn't have to be boring, it doesn't have to itch, it doesn't have to be inconvenient. It can actually match into a society that we're in, a busy one, one that's very on the go. So all our colors are very colorful, and all our products are fun and easy and convenient to clean, convenient to use. And then they look and feel like the single-use version that we are eliminating, so that the switch from going from tissue pack to tissue pack is easy, because it feels like the same thing and the box looks like the same thing. So you're not in doubt of how do I use this. You don't take the Q-tip up and like, well, do I turn it around? It has to really look like single use, but it's not.
And Isabel, do you think in terms of the pandemic and the way that we live now, do you think that we've taken many steps backwards when it comes to sustainability?
I think you can look at it at 2 points, because what happens right now is, of course, that we are a very wasteful society because of everything going on with the pandemic and all the restriction and all of the regulations that you have. But it's also put a lot of people are talking about it. A lot of people are changing. A lot of people are actually going into this fight about single use and about trash and unnecessary waste. And so I think that in the long run, the pandemic is really good in this area. In the short run, it's not so fun. So but I believe there has been a shift. I think I almost would say that there's actually been a paradigm shift in people's mindset and how that they look at their waste.
Both of your companies are doing things that maybe governments should be doing in terms of tackling child labour, making it easier for us to live more sustainable lives. To what extent do you think that businesses can make a difference as opposed to governments? And to what extent are you giving governments an easy time by taking on a mission that should be a national mission or an international mission? Ben, maybe I'll start with you.
Look, we think it's up to everyone to change, because it's not down to consumers, or it's not down to governments. Most of the power sits with the companies. So what we do at Tony's is we put we don't spend on typical marketing. We don't have the big budgets, and it's quite a complicated message, and we lead with the mission. So most of our effort and work goes into bringing consumers up to speed with what's actually going on, because we actually believe that if consumers know that the favorite brands that they're using and eating and buying are not doing good stuff, and in our case that's in in cocoa and basically ignoring the problem of child labor and slavery, then they can make an informed choice. So most of our effort goes in there, but we do also lean quite heavily on governments because legislation, I think, is crucial. And I think at the moment the legislation doesn't go far enough. I think companies are actively ignoring problems in their supply chain. And what we want to do, and we have a petition live on our website at the moment, is push to ensure that companies have to do the due diligence on their supply chain. So they actively have to look for the problem. Now, we have never found any instances of slavery on our partner cooperatives, but we actively look for it, because if you don't go looking for it, you can't solve it. But last year we found about 300 instances of child work that we weren't happy with. But that's important for us, because whilst there are 300 cases that we'd rather not find, if you're not looking for them, you can't find them, you can't solve them, you can't remediate them. And most companies are just turning a blind eye. And the power sits firmly with those companies. Those big companies have a choice how much they pay for their cocoa. Last year, the Ivorian government and the Ghanaian government got together and they agreed to put a levy, a living income differential, on the every ton of cocoa that's basically sold, of about $400. And what we've seen over the last year is companies, the big companies, no matter what they say, try and do everything to circumnavigate that additional payment. And really sadly now, the price of cocoa, due to demand, but also people pushing their contracts a little bit further out to see what's happening, the actual price of cocoa has gone the other way and dropped by 25%. And that's shocking, because we saw this happen about 4 or 5 years ago, and all it meant is that the farmers got a raw deal. The price of cocoa dropped by 36%. The farmers basically saw 36% less. The price in the supermarkets didn't get any cheaper for the consumers, and it went to the big manufacturers in the middle. And we don't think that is right. That took about 4.5 billion out of farmers' pockets. So it's up to consumers. We want consumers to be aware, and I think consumers are more aware, but it's not just down to governments. Companies control how much they buy, how much they sell for, and their P&Ls. So we think it's unfair to put all the focus on the governments. It's got to start with the companies.
I imagine you'd agree with that, Isabel.
Definitely. And like Ben said, we all have to do ours. We can't just rely on government to solve issues. It's very much about the consumers knowing what is actually going on, what you can choose and what you can choose not to do. But it's also, of course, about getting them involved, and the government and everybody to also understand what is happening and how can we together change this. But we all have to be part of it. It's not one part. It's not the private sector. It's also the private sector.
And Isabel, when we look at sustainability as an idea, it is very zeitgeisty. It's the sort of thing that many brands claim to be doing in their marketing because they know it's going to appeal to a certain kind of consumer. I mean, to what extent are you concerned about that, sort of hollow promises from other companies in a similar space who might not really have the same kind of mission that you do?
I think, yes, greenwashing is probably the best term for this. Sustainability is not very, it is actually quite difficult to really understand. It is not, okay, you use this material, then it's sustainable. It's very, how do you use it? How long will it hold? How will I dispose of it? There's so many questions. So I understand why a lot of companies can make promises that they can't hold, or that they don't understand how it actually is produced. And for example, a known thing like bamboo is just it has such a good rep right now, so people are using it wrongly, and there are a lot of bamboo materials that are not sustainable, but it's very hard for the consumer to know and not know. I think we're going to see a lot of people looking into this. I think that we will have more knowledge. I have more knowledge now than I had 5 years ago, just as a consumer, also in other products that I don't create. And I think that is because people are becoming more aware that we don't just believe what people say, we actually try to investigate. I see our customers really asking a lot of questions on our materials and why we do and where we ship and how it's packaged. And I love that. I love that actually people are starting to ask questions openly in forums, openly on Instagram, Facebook. So we can start the dialogue, and so that we can explain why. And the same thing should be with everybody else.
And when it comes to people asking questions, if you are running a business that makes explicit brand claims, marketing claims about a kind of purity of intention, you're going to be open to a different kind of scrutiny. You're going to be held up to a different standard, aren't you? I mean, tell us about that, Ben, because I know that there have been headlines about Tony's Chocolonely over the past year.
Yeah, so we're totally transparent, always have been. We publish absolutely everything we do each and every year in our fair report, which tells people the good, the bad, the money that we made, where the money went, and the size of the problem in front of us. So earlier this year, so one of the things we've done work with for a long time is we work with a company called Barry Callebaut, because Barry Callebaut are the biggest chocolate producer in the world, and they are part of the problem, because they also have a big say on what happens in West Africa. Now, we've been working with them for a long time because they effectively, if we can't demonstrate that we can work with them in a scalable way, we can't show the big chocolate companies that what we're doing is scalable, because they'll say you're niche, or what you're doing can't be scaled to the level that we need it. But I mean, what actually happened about probably about 4 or 5 months ago now, an article came out that basically brought this to light, but which we've never hidden, and basically criticised us for basically working with Barry Callebaut. So we, it was, to be honest, it was a bit of a shock to me that made the paper, because we talk about it openly. But you've got to accept that some people will always challenge and find fault, and actively, as Isabel said, we welcome that. If we welcome the challenge, because if you are going to, and we do put ourselves out there and we say, look at what we do, criticize us, make us stronger, but you've got to expect that challenge, and you've got to take it as well. And if there's stuff that you can do to learn from it, then that's got to be a good thing. But yeah, particularly in this instance, it probably caught us a little bit off guard, because for me personally, if I'm totally honest, it was a bit of a nothing story. We got dropped from a list that there was no accreditation behind. But look, honestly, if it raises awareness of the fact, because the biggest story, right, for me is this: you've got 1.6 million kids working in West Africa illegally on cocoa farms. That is a story in itself, and it totally missed that. But if this article helped raise awareness of that, then hey, that's a good thing.
Isabel, do you think that part of the package of being a company like this is being prepared to accept this different level of scrutiny and holding your hands up when you make mistakes?
Yes, and I also think that it's the future of companies. I think we're going to look at companies like we look at our two companies. People are going to ask more questions, and they want more transparency, and it's actually easier for us. Well, we're quite a startup, only being 2 years into this, but being transparent from the very beginning is easier than, for example, getting transparency through Nestle. Like, that's such a huge company, and the same way for us, Essity, that would be our counter, and it's that is such a huge machine that you have to get transparency through. That's also harder. I think they're going to get there, and I think that customers are going to demand it. So we're actually this is what is going to be the normal.
In terms of how you communicate your message effectively without alienating consumers, of course, it's really vitally important to have a really good product. The people, the chocolate has to taste good. The Q-tips have to work and be attractive. But how important is it to appear to be doing things that are innovative, to be doing something new to solve a problem? Isabel, maybe you could go first on that.
I think that it's really, really important that we go in and that we make products and that everything is very well thought through. that our materials are well thought through, that our design, that all of the elements around the products really, really work. I think that's everything, actually. Because if it doesn't hold, then don't buy it. You know, we have to really create something that has the message and that also works. Yeah.
And Ben, do you feel that the pressure to be innovative, to have crazy, wacky flavors, how do you communicate the message whilst making it a product that people are interested and engaged in its own right?
Yeah, good question. I think we, for ourselves, we have to be that bridge. We have to go where the consumers are, because that's where the problem lies. It's, you know, it's the home of the big companies. So whilst we do really innovate and we do have some crazy flavors, so this is white chocolate, raspberry, popping candy. You know, our big focus has to be on where consumers want to find and the kind of products that they're looking for. So at the moment, that means we're squarely particularly in the UK, you know, heavily focused on the likes of Mars, Nestle, Cadbury's, because that's probably where 70-80% of the UK volume is. So we have to go after that. But at the same time, we do want to innovate, and that, you know, the tweaks to the packaging and the recipes get people talking. So it brings consumers in, it brings shoppers in. But and this sometimes pains me to say it, if 89% of the people who buy Tony's buy us because they love the chocolate and they love the packaging, so only 11% are actively buying us because of our mission. So but it doesn't really matter. It'd probably be, you know, maybe we'd like it the other way around, but actually if that product and that packaging and a little bit of innovation screams from the shelf enough to pique people's interest and get them to pick up a bar, and when they unwrap the bar, they read inside, you know, why we do what we do, and then they might wonder why our bar's unequally divided, and that's because it tells the story of the unequal nature of the cocoa industry. If that gets them into the problem, and then, you know, they can share the problem and they'll talk about it with some friends, then that's basically how we'll change the industry. So innovation is important for us, but what we're probably trying to do is show that there's a different way to make something that people love. Yeah.
But Ben, surely price point is a really big issue here, because if you're trying to take on Mars and Cadbury, their products are much cheaper than yours. You know, in terms of a bar of your chocolate, amazingly delicious as it is, it feels like a luxury item, doesn't it? It's not a sort of, you know, it's not a Mars bar.
No, and that's because it's so bloody chunky though. So that's 180 grams. So it is more expensive than Cadbury's and Mars and Nestle. It's cheaper per gram than Green and Blacks and Lindt. So it is that bridge. But look, cheap chocolate is bad. Someone somewhere is paying the price for it, and it's not the manufacturer. So unfortunately, it's the people further down the value chain. In this case, out in West Africa. So it makes it harder, right? You know, I'd love to be able to do what we do and sell a bar of chocolate for £2, but the maths doesn't work. But take a step back and you look at, if you go online and look at Mondelez or Hershey's, if you look at the operating profit that these companies are making, it's not 4%, 5%, 6%. You're talking 16 to 24%, and that's not right. The money's there; it's just going to the wrong place. So, recut the P&Ls, do it slightly differently. Look, we're really fortunate. I mean, we don't get everything right, but we're really fortunate. We started our business back to front, right? We didn't start with the goal of making money. We started with the problem and then built our business model around it. So I know it's easy for me to say this, and I might be coming across as a little bit naive, but there is more than enough money. It just needs to be cut a little bit fairer.
And is that different for you, Isabel? Because your product, in a way, you know, it being more expensive than a box of reusable Q-tips, that kind of adds to the appeal of it, maybe, that it feels like something that you will look after and use again and again, and an object that you like rather than something that you want to throw away.
Yes, our price point is really, really important. The goal, our communication goal of being very precise with our wording, because it is so complex, like what is sustainable, what is not. I think that's so important, because you have customers, that you have them in such a little span. Like, why should this be not good? Like, not everybody goes really into depth with it. So I think that creating a really, really good price point where you're not too far away from the single-use alternative at a store price is really, really important. But we also need to design something that can be manufactured easily and that we can get a really high quality on, so that it can withhold a lot of uses, so that our mission is not scattered in the process of trying to meet the public. So everything is a dance. It's trying to figure out, where can we put the price where people want to buy it and want to make this change, and also how high can we go quality wise so that this product really makes a difference, and then getting our message out very clearly, like this you can use 1,000 times. It's been tested, and we know, and I don't know how many times you clean your ears, but that's probably a couple of years. So I think that, messages like this, and also trying to understand the single-use industry and being very, very figuratively, this is why it is so bad. Because it's not always, you can't really see it just, I used a Q-tip today and tomorrow. Yeah, but over a year that accumulates, and that's a lot.
Lots of questions coming in from the floor. The first one is for you, Ben. Tony's is currently selling 2 elements: the product, recipe, taste, look, feel, and a moral message. If Tony's made chocolate bars that mirrored the chocolate bars from the biggest competitors that are morally questionable, wouldn't that make the message behind Tony's purer and simpler for consumers?
Yeah, look, it's a really great question, and actually it's something that we did do. So at the beginning of this year, part of the problem that we face is these big chocolate companies have been saying that they will rid the slavery and child labour from the cocoa industry for well over 20 years. In fact, 20 years ago this year, they signed something called the Harkin-Engel Protocol, that they agreed a 10-year time frame to abolish it from their value chains. And that 2 decades on, we're no further along. So actually what we did back in January is we took 4 of people's favourite bars, and we basically mimicked them. And we said, look, you're saying it can't be done, it's too complicated, but here you go, we've done it for you, and we've done it using our 5 sourcing principles. So that's something that we did, and we did a stunt, and it got quite a lot of press and publicity, and actually it got pulled off the shelves of one of our UK supermarkets, who was our partner, because of pressure from the big guys who didn't want to be associated with it. But it worked for us, and it created enough noise for us to, again, raise awareness of the issue. So, I mean, that's partly what we do, but we do need to do it in a way that works for Tony's and our brand as well. So, yeah, it's really interesting. It was one of the campaigns that we did, and they were so popular, those products, and you can go online and Google them, that we've actually now brought them out into the UK. We've just had to change the packaging somewhat, so they're not quite as controversial as they were.
Another question from the floor here. We need a new way of learning, thinking, working, and connecting to build a new world and to create sustainable systems. How do the speakers believe we can co-create this alignment with purpose? Isabel, that's a big question. That's kind of like, what alternative to capitalism would you like to offer planet Earth? So no biggie there, but what's your take on that?
Well, I would say that I think that if we really have to make a difference, I think we all have to make a difference, because it's not about, the few people that really change around their lives and live very sustainably and they're just going to, save the world. It's that everybody is part of this. Your grandma, your dad, your parents, your friends, your dog, everybody has to be part of this change, and we have to all start looking at our lives, our daily lives, our where we buy our chocolate, getting just that knowledge of knowing that chocolate from Hershey's is maybe not as sustainably made than you would think. So understanding just that all of the products that we take into our lives, everything that we buy, everything that we throw out, that has a consequence, and we have to together figure out alternatives. Like, we're in the midst right now of creating alternatives to items that some of them have never had alternatives. We've just had these items for the last 50 years, 100 years, and we never thought to change them out because we have a lot of resources on the planet. But now it's slowly we don't, and there are a lot of things that are changing, and it has been for a while, but people are starting to realize it. So I think that the best way for us to co-create a better life and a better, a more sustainable planet is that we all just do ours. We're starting at single use. Somebody else is looking at the meat industry, the chocolate. You know, we just all have to look and work at what we can.
Ben, there's a question for you here. The history of progress is a story of step-by-step progress when it comes to consumerism and societal changes. Why have Tonys decided to take on so many issues at once?
Well, we haven't actually. We have a very single-minded mission, which is to focus on slavery and child labour in West Africa. And that's the only reason that we exist. And that kind of guides everything that we do. So as long as there's inequality, slavery and child labour on cocoa farms, we will keep going. What we also do is we limit our impact everywhere. So we don't use palm oil because it's not good. We only use we don't use plastic. We only use cocoa butter, and that cocoa butter is made in Abidjan because it provides employment back again in the Ivory Coast. All these things that we do outside of that one singular mission, we want to limit our impact, but we have one aim in mind, and that is to make all chocolate worldwide 100% slave-free. So it's a big one, but yeah, we're very single-minded. We just try and not do bad elsewhere as well, but we tend not to talk about that stuff too much because otherwise it becomes a bit confusing.
Another question for you, Ben, very quickly. What makes Tony's Chocolonely different from Divine chocolate?
Look, I mean, it's different in a number of ways, but look, Divine are one of the good guys. They have just a slightly different business model. So Divine are part owned by the cooperative and the farmers they work with. They're great. We love them. They should be in everyone's baskets because they're trying to do good stuff. And we just have a slightly different business model. Because we believe that actually the way to inspire change is to show the big chocolate companies that there's a model that they can copy. So our solution has to be scalable, which is why we work with Barry Callebaut, for example, as I was talking about earlier, because they are the biggest chocolate producer, but we deviate from that slightly because all of our cocoa is separated throughout their value chain, so it doesn't get tainted with other bits. So Divine are one of the good guys. We just have a different business model, and we want that business model to be copied by all of the big companies, and it can be.
Is the future of business for every business to have and articulate a purpose beyond making money, Isabel?
I think that's what we're going to see, yes. I think especially, I think you see that more and more, especially with new companies, that you can't just come in and be like, I make sneakers. You know, they always have an edge. There's so much competition that you have to like kind of make your own waters. And I think that having a purpose is very strong. I think that the new generation, why I think they're called, I just read an article about them, and they're very purpose driven. So everybody coming into consumerism is also they're gonna be more. There's gonna be a want to buy elements and get into a lifestyle, into a company, buy something from a company that has a purpose. I think that becomes stronger and stronger with the new generation.
Would you agree with that, Ben? That consumers want to be consuming from companies with a purpose?
Yeah, I do. Whether or not it's going to happen fast enough, I don't know. But I definitely think that things are shifting. There's a big movement in the UK for B Corps, which are businesses that have a legal responsibility and put as much focus on profit, people and planet, as they do profit. And I actually saw some stats that said I think 76% of people in the UK thought that business should have a legal responsibility to protect the natural environment, and 72% to protect the people and planet. And look, we see this as well. I have never had such a motivated team, and that is down to the fact that we're trying to change the industry, and it's really motivating to think that you're getting out of bed not just to make a load of faceless shareholders a load of money. You genuinely want to change things. But that, I would say, the risk is, to the greenwashing point, that has to be authentic. You have to be transparent. There's been an incident in the last week where a company like BrewDog has, through an open letter from employees, you start to uncover things that actually maybe they're not true to their word in terms of how they're treating their people. So if you're doing it, purpose cannot just be a buzzword. But I think that's a bit outdated. I think that's going back to like 2016. I think things are really shifting, and if you want to attract the best talent and you want to grow faster, B Corps are growing at 28 times the pace of the average business in the UK, then I think you've got to be doing some good in the world. And I really hope that things do continue to shift in that way, because it is up to the role of businesses to help.
Fantastic stuff. Well, this has been really, really insightful, and I want to, I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of everyone, and extending a warm virtual applause to Isabel and Ben for their insights today. Thank you. Now, the next session on the stage is at 4 p.m. UK time. It is Cannabis and Sex, Overcoming Barriers to Build Taboo Businesses. That definitely sounds like one you don't want to miss. Chocolate, cannabis and sex. We bring you everything here on this stage. So we hope to see you later on this afternoon.